Hello and welcome to the pilot episode of Shortcut, the podcast that takes you on a shortcut to developer experience, developer productivity, and product engineering. I'm Morten.
And this is Marilag.
And we are here in Copenhagen, excited to officially launch our podcast. Yeah, we have, of course, invited one of our old friends, Rasmus Hald, as our very first guest.
Hello, Rasmus.
Hello. Hey, thanks for having me.
Wow.
And thanks for having me on the very first episode. I'm so proud to be here.
We're so happy to have you. I'm super excited and really happy to get to have this conversation. And I want to ask the first question first, because we were just in one of the sessions in Copenhagen Dev Festival. And Morten and I, we were in a session called Developer Happiness by Damian Brady. And actually, I'm copying him. So his first question to the audience was, did you have a good day?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have had a wonderful day and been working with wonderful colleagues. And now I'm here. Did you have a great day?
Did we have a great day? Yes. And I think so. Depends. It's subjective.
It's getting better and better.
Yeah, it's getting better. Well, you made our day really good today. As soon as I saw you in camera, I'm like, okay, now this is going to be a good day. Morten, Rasmus, and I have known each other for quite a while now, for several years from the Azure user group here in Copenhagen. And so back then we met through our common interest in cloud and community building. And we had a lot of fun doing a lot of community stuff back then. But now there's another topic that the three of us are really happen to be passionate about. And that's developer experience. And that's going to be what we're going to talk about today.
Rasmus, you have been in the developer experience space since your time at Microsoft and been with Maersk and now at Lego. I think it goes without saying that you have a certain degree of obsession to this movement. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I think I have two passion points that relates to my work. And one is actually cloud technology. And the other one is developer experience. So it just happened that my day job it's even in my title, right? I do cloud and I do developer experience. Focusing on developer experience, I find it fascinating that we can help creative engineers, right? Developers, I see them as creators and creatives, that we can help reduce toil in the delivery flow. And the reason I use these words is because they come from lean. So lean manufacturing that has been transformed into lean for software delivery. And it's an amazing framework to work with developer productivity. But just looking at lean comes from factory, right? Looking at developers as a factory, it's not the whole equation, right? You also need to look at developer happiness and a lot of other factors that all are part of this experience. So I think that's where my obsession comes in. And you said, Morten, I used to work for Microsoft. There I was an external developer advocate, I believe it's called today. So that was external facing, shifting to Maersk now, the Lego group. I am building this experience for my colleagues, not the customers of the company. And that's two different practices, I will say, but it's some of the same mechanics.
Let's dig in a little bit to developer experience. I think many people are still kind of confused with what developer experience is, including developer themselves. How do you actually frame developer experience and its value? And I'm sure it's different framing when you talk to the developers and engineers themselves, and then when you talk to the leaders, and when you talk to the stakeholders. And more so, how do you prove this value is worth investing on?
Yeah, I think you hit on something that is super difficult in this space, and that is what's the value? Why should we care, right? And I'm thrilled to see that more and more, you say, non-digital native organizations are investing in developer experience. Because I remember my first job after Microsoft, I really had to argue hard that this was something we needed to do. In my experience, becomes easier and easier now because the value that you create with developer experience increasingly recognized by technology organizations inside traditional organizations, right? But to get to the bottom line, what is the value that we are trying to generate here? I would say it's multitude. But before I answer it, I just want to give a pointer to our listeners. If you're interested in a programmatic approach to how to measure the value, I really want to give a shout out to the SPACE framework for developer productivity that is very much built by Nicole Bosgren, who is a researcher in this topic specifically. But I want to highlight some of the things that are in the framework, which is actually predates the framework itself, but has been pulled in to show that this is many angles. So you have the productivity. We need to talk about productivity, which is about how can we help our developer colleagues save time. So how can we remove work from everyone? And I work in a company where we have 250 plus product teams building awesome digital solutions, right? And just imagine if every product team had to run their own GitHub, run their own planning boards, run their own cloud practice, they would have to spend a lot of time on you could say indirect value giving pieces of work. Now, if we pull that into some central product teams that does it on behalf of everyone else, there's a natural productivity or time saving in each and every other product team that doesn't have to do it. So there's something in that, I guess we can call it centralization, but we more call it enabling factor or platform teams that does something on behalf of others. So there's something very tangible there. Then there's developer metrics, and there's many sides to this. And it's also, you could say, a bit of a controversial topic because we don't wanna measure developers on velocity when it comes to their individual performance, but we actually want to give developers and developer teams some tools so they can run experiment on their own productivity. So, for example, hey, if we develop this in another framework, do we get to value quicker? Or if we introduce A/B testing, do we then get less incidents, etc. Right? So just building a framework for the metrics that are valuable for your organization, and they could be about flow, could be about availability, could be about cycle times. It doesn't really matter, but a framework are doing that. And then I also want to highlight developer happiness. I don't know if you noticed, we were all 40 plus, right? But I mean, we are not enough developers in Denmark, in Europe, in the world. I would actually say, right, there's a fight for talent in any organization. I think increasingly having that workplace edge that you actually care not just about the well-being. We should always all care about the well-being of each other, right? But also making sure that you are a cool place for developers to work. And that developer happiness is multitude, right? It's about well-being, it's about team well-being, but it's also about, hey, am I working on something interesting, right? And what if I want to work on something else? Can I move to another product and work on that for a period of time? So how do we make these engaging, well-working, good workplaces for engineers?
So maybe my follow-up question around this is, how do you actually balance, making developers happy, which is of course a priority, over the other priorities? So, finding that right balance of giving happiness, but also knowing, how do we balance this out with the other matrices?
Yeah, we can spend all our time on happiness. Trust me, I work for a toy company. we can definitely be building all through the day. But at the end of the day, I mean, we need, as individuals, we get paid to go to work, and we need to give value back to the organizations we work for, right? So that is the exchange of value. That's how it works. So you're absolutely right. We also need to focus on making sure that we deliver what is expected of us as individual, as team, as an organization. And I think if people are engaged in the problems that they are solving, you find happiness, right? If you care about what you're working on, you find happiness. I can only speak for myself here, but if I don't understand the value that I'm creating, then I have a harder time picking up the tasks. So there's definitely something in this area that's interesting to work on when you work on developer experience. And there's different methodologies you can use to make sure that our colleagues are engaged with the problem and therefore automatically improving flow inside the product teams. And I think in my experience, what works really well is if you base your organization, if you build it on a product organization rather than a project organization. And if you move away from being a functional organization, so a classic IT silo and a classic dev silo and security silo, etc., and then into a building cross-functional teams that are based on DevOps ways of working, because then you first of all, you create an organization that looks like the architecture you would like to have. So a loosely coupled architecture with product teams that are sticking to their bounded context and doing their own development and operation end to end. Right. And let's talk about the bounded context, because that is the value outcome that a product team has, right? So one product has one product team and one value outcome. And can that be an app that builds the best possible kids experience? You are well connected to the product, right? You have a product manager that represents the business problem that you're solving. You understand it fully, and you can see direct feedback when you release new features. Whereas in a functional organization, you would often be very remote from the problem, right? Yes, you're part of the value chain because you are provisioning this or you are developing that, but you are not. You're so far from the value stream itself. So my recommendation is product organizations where you could say product teams value stream aligned, so they're connected to a business problem, and then make them as small as possible. I think Amazon coined it as a 2-pizza team, so not bigger than what can be happy with 2 pizzas for a meal, right? So that's about 5 people, but it can be bigger. And then you need other types of teams, right? But this really connects people with the business problem. And you would also find that digital organizations are organized like this. And I believe non-digital companies can do the same, and they should do the same.
Okay, I think we're gonna have a new episode just talking about establishing a product-centric organization, right? I think that's gonna be super interesting as well. But just going back, I guess we're trying to say is that developer happiness is not just about productivity or getting things done quicker, faster, or saving time, but at the end of it, the most important thing is that you actually resonate with the value that you are delivering. And you can realize that with a product organization, even if you're in a non-technical company.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's my recommendation. And if you can't wait for that episode, I can recommend the literature called Teams Apologies that really gives you an example of how to build your organization around this way of working.
Yeah.
And now with all these talks about organizations, I think one interesting aspect also that I think we talk a lot about when we talk developer experiences is both the size of the company and the type of company that are working with developer experience. Like, does it require a certain size for it to make sense for your company to start working on developer experience, or can any company do more to improve the experience of the developers?
Yeah. I think that's a good question, and I guess it depends, right? I would say for it to make sense, you need developers / engineers. And pardon me, I use the word in the same situation because for me, developers are engineers are developers. But in order for an organization, in my experience, for it to be valuable to have dedicated people, there needs to be someone to make happy and productive, right? And let's be honest. I mean, many organizations are outsourced when it comes to development, right? So they simply do not have their own developers, but they buy capacity from consulting firms, and that's great. But maybe in these cases, you would expect that part of the service that you buy would come with developer experience, right? And you wouldn't necessarily have to build that experience internally, unless it makes sense, of course. But if you do have developers internally, I don't think it takes that many in order for it to start making experience. And it might be just one, if you have a couple of teams of developers, it might just be one person that has a broader role, that looks after the dev tools, maybe builds the needed governance with the cloud provider, etc. So having a person half-time doing the developer experience pieces, but it might not be enough to build, implement the space framework, right? And start doing management reporting on developer happiness. Yeah, maybe you grow a little first, and you get to that later. Yeah. And I would say that anyone that has developers should care about the topic, and then let it grow with the company. For larger organizations, it absolutely makes sense. And I would advise that you get started as soon as possible, because it takes time to build a practice. There's no good books or manuals on how to do this, and every organization is different, have a different culture, and that needs to be embedded in your developer experience.
Yeah. So what about, we talk about the types of companies also. Like if you're not a tech company, can you still benefit from developer experience, or by providing a better developer experience? Maybe more about also making the rest of the company aware of the importance, because if they're not a tech company, maybe they're not as tuned into the need for developer experience.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and I don't think the rest of the company necessarily should care about developer experience. That's something for the developers, and it's also something developers can give to each other, right? So, but of course you need a buy-in in order for you to do this officially. So I would definitely say that if you have developers, doesn't really matter what type of company you are, this is worth the investment. Digital companies, these pure digital or digital first companies, they often have both internal and external developer experience, or DevRel, the practice can also be extended to. And I would say for organizations that are also digital, it makes sense, right? And to be honest, many organizations are also digital, right? It's difficult to hide from that. So I would almost say that either you outsource your digital, or you also have that capacity internal. But we are all digital organizations. That's how we interact with each other, with our consumers, customers, etc. So the answer is yes. Do it.
Yes. So it's for everyone. All organizations.
Yeah.
And if they don't, if they're not doing it,
what's the flip side? What's the trade-off? Yeah. No, I think you will have a challenge retaining developers. You would risk duplicate effort. So you have multiple people doing the same job. You can also risk a proliferation of technology, because whatever works in one corner of the organization, it might be too difficult to adopt in the other one. You don't have a center of gravity for unifying these solutions, right? You probably also will hear frustrations from developers that everything is very difficult, right? So could be onboarding a new colleague. You have to do everything locally in the local team rather than having a team that looks after it. It could be finding answers, so finding documentations, that can be a nightmare, or just finding the right tools to do the job can be a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, makes sense. I really like what you said there, that developer experience is also just something that we give to each other, like including developers themselves. So, but who do you think is ultimately responsible for this?
Yeah, and that's why I'm advocating for having a developer experience function or team as part of it, because you sort of need a force that cultivates and brings people together, right? I don't know about you, but pretty much everyone I know at work are super busy. So putting together a community on how to use C#, right? How we work with C#, or a cloud community, internal cloud community on how we work with our cloud provider. That's really difficult, right? On your already busy schedule. But where I work, the developer experience team takes care of making that frictionless, right? So we have established a developer portal where people who are interested in finding like-minded people on a specific framework or specific technology stack can go and find, just making super easy to create internal communities. So that's the giving to each other, right? But you need to facilitate that. We have also organized internal conferences. I mean, if I were a developer team, I would never start that and probably never succeed with that. But just by having a catalyst, you can succeed with this. And actually what we find is that there's a lot of positive energy around the initiatives that we do. You sort of just need that center of gravity. So someone driving the agenda, and then someone accelerating, because, I mean, admitted, no matter where you work, right, you have awesome colleagues, and we can learn from each other. So it is really about lifting that up so we can give to each other, because otherwise, to be honest, it doesn't scale, and that's not what it's supposed to do, right?
Well, sounds like a nice place to work, Rasmus. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So that's all very inspiring. What were the toughest challenges that you had to overcome, like to get to here, to achieve this vision of improving the way developers building the products, especially when things are changing all the time with the developer tools? You mentioned portals, platforms, put it all together.
Yeah, but let's talk about my combined experience then in this area, because it is tough. I mean, when bringing in developer experience, it doesn't really matter what angle it is. If you want to get to building a developer portal, if you want to start putting some effort into the tool stack that you use in your company, if you want to work with an engineering community that decides on the languages we develop on, right? Or you even want to go so far as build a developer relations team that amplifies the message of this developer community that many organizations has. That is all. I mean, I think for the three of us, we get it, right? But not every colleague and not every business decision maker in your company will get the apparent value. So it's really about finding that value. And we are actually circling back to where we started, Marilag, because you asked about the value in the beginning. And just be laser focused on the value that you're creating. And what I've done is I've created use a problem paper, problem statement, just calling out where it's difficult. And there's a few things you can do here to amplify the value, and that is to survey your colleagues, ask them what's difficult, not in general terms, right? And I can almost predict what you will get back. It's difficult to find the tools that I need as a developer when I need it, right? It's difficult to find the answers on what I need. And you will probably also hear something on onboarding, right? It's really difficult to onboard to a new project or to a new product team, or even as a new joiner to onboard to the company. It's common practices. And all these relates, I mean, if you work backwards from those problems, you would get to value points that talks about we're wasting a lot of time, right? If I waste 20 hours every time I need to onboard to a new project, or 30 hours or 50 hours, if I waste 3 hours finding a piece of documentation, or even worse, if I don't find it, and then I decide to build it myself, I duplicate effort, and there you're wasting even more time, right? All these are actually bottom line influences, because if you are to accept that's the state of things, you would need to have more colleagues, because you're wasting time, you're duplicating effort, etc. Or if that's not the case, you just get less done. So it is bottom line influences, and just building those, finding the problems that are relevant to your organization, working backwards, and often it's going to be about wasting time. So directly slowing down your time to market and overpaying for the products you do because you're not working in an efficient manner. That's where the value is, and arguing those cases, and you can make them very apparent, right? And then once you have your mandate, go solve it. And here, let me point to a nice template that people can use for this. The overquoted Spotify engineering do awesome work, right? They're so open about their journey into developer experience. But they did a study that they shared on what were the frictions in their development cycle, right? I would go find that because it's really interesting, and it's I would say also a little bit sad, because we all suffer from the same problems.
So we couldn't do a first episode without a question also about developer portal. So I'm curious to hear your point of view of like how important is a developer portal? Is it the first step to a good developer experience, or is it the third, fourth step? Is there things that you should look at first before you enter into a portal? Or what's your take on that?
I think I'm on my fourth developer portal. So not me building. I'm lucky to be surrounded by great colleagues here. I would start with it. Just go. I mean, the first one me and my team created was basically downloading, you could say, an app that we could customize and run in a Kubernetes container. And all it gave us was basically a menu and put stuff in there. And the reason why it's so central is because you need a place where colleagues can go to find. Well, our biggest problem can probably, if I only had an elevator pitch here, I would say it's so difficult to find stuff. We need to address the lack of discoverability of what we already have. So discoverability, you solve that with creating a place where people go to find. And whether it is you start with a SharePoint site, I would not recommend that. Maybe just a simple web app somewhere, and you just have links to, hey, here is our cloud. Here's how you create a cloud account. So link to documentation. So just start there and then start working on it. But just having that place where you go and find, and then you can evolve from there, because discoverability is the first piece. But then I also think you need to create some transparency. So I like to use this example of cloud usage. I hope everyone that can develops on cloud technology. And what you don't want to do in a developer portal is rebuild the cloud provider's interface, right? You want to get the developers as quickly as possible to the API of the cloud provider, so they can do what they need within the guardrails of the company. And if they need a UI, they can go to the cloud provider. However, what you want to bring back is that discoverability. So give you an example. I'm in a product that builds an awesome app, and I want to go and discover what is my cloud accounts, right? What do I have with cloud provider A and B? Get that picture. I also want to know the cost, but I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty details. Just need to know if we're sticking within budget, right? And maybe adjusting my budget, right? Also want to know where my code repos are, etc. But I don't want to interact with the code. So just having that place where you go to discover the assets of the team that I'm working on now massively improves onboarding, massively improves transparency, and you can then build on that, right? Later on, you want to go add your availability metrics, right? So how am I doing on my um, how I'm doing on my availability objectives versus what I promised my stakeholders. How much do we have in the backlog? Right? What's our flow like in the development side? So you can go and have more advanced metrics, because this is all towards the team itself. So you can continuously grow and continuously learn from this. But I would just start, if I had nothing, I would just start with something that easy to find and then work from there.
Yeah. Maybe that even plays into our final question, but let's see if we can make this one short and sweet. With the things that you know today, can you provide our listeners with a shortcut to a developer experience to make their journey a little bit shorter?
So maybe this is a good way to sum up what we have talked about. So I would start with the problem and don't over-engineer. The problem is going to evolve over time. The most important is actually to ask the developers what they find difficult, and then try to sum that up to some general themes. You will find that your organization looks a lot like everyone else, because that's just the nature of it, right? In our different contexts. And then I would be very crisp on what's the value of solving those problems, right? How much more efficient can we be? How much time can we save? How much company risk can we reduce by making sure that we're using the same tools for vulnerability scanning, right? And you can just point to the value of these things. And thereby get your mandate to solve or to introduce developer experience. So that's the shortcut to get started. Once you're started there, well, start small, start again, listen to what the developers need, right? Maybe create a community for developer experience, and then you will have good people there that helps drive the backlog of whatever effort you can throw after this problem. Think in the developer portal as a place to solve the discoverability issue, and then remember it's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to have fun in the process, right? It's cool to be an engineer. It's cool to be a developer. It's also hard work, right? But there's a reason why we're here, and we've been here for a while.
It's been really fun talking to you, Rasmus.
Right.
Lots of insights. I'm sure our listener has been inspired with this, and I know that we're trying to solve some classic problems here that we have seen in our entire career, and I believe that you're onto something here. So I hope our listeners can be inspired, and that there will be more leaders like you who will continue the journey to better developer experience in their organizations. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for listening to Shortcut, your shorter path to engineering, cloud, and tech leadership success.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.